Lately, I've been noticing something that's kind of uncomfortable about friendships. I really want close friends, but I myself don't act like the close friend that I'd want. I recently had this conversation with a girl where she was talking about her toxic ex, and I noticed in that hour that we spoke, I learned nothing about her, and she learned nothing about me. And to be honest, I kind of just chalked that conversation up as an empty experience. And I think this problem can be painted on a larger scale too. My college had nearly 50,000 people, and yet one of the most common forum posts on there is about loneliness. Even though there were so many people, it didn't always feel like there was a lot of connection. It feels like a lot of times people were friendly, but that nobody was making the move to initiate. And I think the problem with that is that everybody looks like they're socially full, but emotionally, nobody's needs of connection are being met. Which, yeah, the contrast of that is really hard to live with. And I think that's why it can feel really exhausting, because the same questions get asked for every single person you meet. What's your name? Where are you from? And what's your major? Yet it stops there. And now you have 200 people that you're kind of acquaintances with, yet you don't feel like you know any of them. And they don't feel like they know you. And I think that's a really common and felt experience. And for a while, I think it really can mess with your head, because if there's so many people, if there's so many clubs being offered, am I the problem? I feel like you should lead, huh? I feel like Spider-Man. But it feels like we're stretched thin emotionally, physically. And I think it's one of those things where the answer may feel simple. I think people, as we know, care a lot. People really do want connection, that it's really difficult to give connection an honest try consistently, which at the end of the day is what connection asks for. I think it's a lot easier to protect myself than to be vulnerable and wait for proof that this connection would be safe. And this made me realize I am not the greatest friend myself. I'm very out of sight, out of mind. But the second distance happens and even the slightest bit of friction takes place, all of a sudden, I retreat. And I think it really feels bad too, because it takes so much time to find a good connection. And often a lot of these people I've known for years, and yet the second some distance happens, it's like my mind doesn't realize or acknowledge what it took to get there and just throws it away as if I just met them yesterday. And the cool thing is I am taking a step towards being a good friend again, which, sounds a little bit silly, but I think it really is something that I could build the muscle at, just like with everything else. And I think I probably shouldn't be so hard on myself, because what worked when I was 9, being able to go to a friend's house 5 minutes away and having 10 minutes of homework, basically having no worries in life, it's a pretty different circumstance than when you're an adult and life actually comes at you. So here's some things that I've been trying to do. So one of the things that I wanted to try is something simple and low pressure, but also gives me that connection that I do long for, and it was calls. I've always been close enough to a majority of my friends that I could walk or drive to them. But as somebody who is living in a new country now, it becomes increasingly more important, and not necessarily set a rigid amount of times I'm going to call or who I'm going to call, but just checking in with people that I used to keep in touch with in college. And to be honest, it's had some really wonderful results. Sometime around mid-2025, I was calling my best friend about once a week, and it felt great. It was really natural, it felt really easy, and aside from maybe middle school when we used to hang out a few days a week, this might be arguably the second closest or closest I've ever felt with him in my life. And I love it. And I think one of the cool things I realized is through calling my friend weekly and getting closer with him and just chatting about life together, It kept us connected about what we're doing day to day. It was frequent, but it didn't feel like it was too much either. And one of the cool things I realized is I learned how I enjoy connecting with people. And I think something really cool that I figured out in doing something like this is that friendship is way less about the big moments and way more about the consistent little touch points in each other's lives. And I'm still trying to figure out more ways to make it a little bit easier, but I do think it's a start, and it's helped me feel a lot more connected with people in a lot more ways than I honestly would have imagined. Many people argue you don't owe anybody anything, and you should cut off what's not good for your life. While I do think there is some truth in advocating for yourself, I do think we have also gotten to a point where one point of friction to lead to a lot of friendships and relationships being broken. And I think something important that we might be missing is connections often thrive more after going through a hardship, communicating things through. But I think it's really easy nowadays to not give that a second chance. Because if one person pulls back a little bit, the other one wants to protect themselves a little bit more. And I think on a large scale, this can lead to a lot more people withdrawing. But I think with the right person who wants to give it a shot, it will feel effortless, even if there's effort involved. And I think for myself, I'm realizing that maybe it's not about finding a connection that's effortless, because there's always going to be effort from both sides. And I think that might be the wrong metric to use for something like a connection. And I think maybe a better way to look at it is trying to find a connection that's worth the effort. So yeah, maybe ask that person to grab some ice cream. You never know how it could bloom and what the connection could turn into. Thank you so much for watching today, and bye-bye.